Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this edition of the Zero Waste webinar series. And today we'll touch our main theme will be outcome-based finance through high-integrity plastic credits to support EPR objectives. My name is Carlos Silva Filho. I am a member of the United Nations Secretary General's Advisory Board on Zero Waste. We entered this month when we celebrate the International Day of Zero Waste on the 30th of March. So it's very opportune to have this another webinar series on zero waste. And I'm pleased to serve as your moderator today. Uh, we chose this topic because, as everybody knows, the global plastic waste challenge is no longer just an environmental issue. It's an economic, social, and climate imperative. While EPR frameworks are expanding worldwide with regional difference from one place to another, we know that implementation gaps remain, particularly in financing, traceability, and outcomes on the ground. Bridging these gaps requires innovative and scalable solutions that connect capital with verified impact. So, outcome-based finance represents a shift, and this is what we will touch today because we need to move from funding intentions to paying for results. And high integrity plastic credits are emerging as a complementary tool to EPR systems designed with strong standards, ensuring additionality, traceability. It's very important that we have full traceability of the whole value chain. And here I want to highlight, I live in Brazil, I'm based in Brazil, to highlight a new program of the Brazilian government to ensure traceability throughout the whole value chain. Very, very innovative and interesting. And we also need through high integrity plastic credits to ensure social safeguards. So before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. Please keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking, and feel free to use the chat box or the raise hand function if you would like to contribute. We will have time at the end for Q&A and some contributions from you guests, from our participants. With that, let me thank you again for joining, and I look forward to a rich and constructive discussion. So, in order to begin, I'm pleased to introduce Video Yu, Senior Program Officer at Vera, who will set the stage by introducing plastic credit certification systems and their role in EPR schemes as an innovative financing mechanism. Video, over to you.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Just confirm you can see my slides?
Yes,
great.
it sounds good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's my honor to be here and speak with you. I'll set the scene in introducing what are plastic credit certification systems and how they work as innovative finance mechanism, especially when supporting EPR systems. So just quickly, what is plastic credits? If you don't know, I recommend this report that was published by the World Bank in 2024. You can scan the QR code to download it. So essentially, plastic credits can be understood as an environmental certificate that represents a unit amount. It could be a ton, could be a kilo of plastic waste that's collected or recycled. The definition vary among different programs as there are various crediting programs out there, and they could have different definitions or eligibility criteria, calculation methods, or a level of transparency. But essentially, I think it's a common view that plastic credits as an emerging result-based mechanism, as Carlos mentioned, is quite key to really go from intention to result. So this is really it could be a very powerful tool to really drive this. And plastic credit can be used for both compliance and voluntary purposes. And essentially, it's just a way to drive aligned finance to really get to real impact. And also, it's important to recognize, and we fully recognize that it could be a very powerful tool in our toolbox, but it's not a silver bullet, and definitely it doesn't displace or give excuse for not taking long-term efforts by governments and businesses, and also making efforts on the upstream and working on reduction. I think someone's mic is okay. So as briefly mentioned, not all plastic credits are the same. And so the World Bank report that I mentioned actually highlighted there are three categories that they suggested. So for example, the first category, so these categories are basically based on the level of transparency and independence and the stringency of the requirements. And there has been an industry effort to really strengthen the whole industry to the Prevent Waste Alliance has also published a report in 2024 to set minimum requirements so that the plastic credit mechanisms could improve their quality collectively to really strengthen the market and to show more integrity. Essentially, the plastic credit can provide various benefits to tackle plastic waste pollution. And for example, driving finance, this is most essential to waste management projects and increase recycled content and address legacy plastic pollution. And also it puts a price essentially on using plastics and plastic consumption and production. And as it will be partially accounting for the environmental externality as it's really accounting for the price of waste management. And the standards and methodology of many high quality plastic credits programs are really already out there, it's established and provides a framework for traceable result-based accounting. And last but not least, many requirements that plastic credit certification programs already have mandates regarding the informal waste sector. It really creates more possibilities of benefit sharing among various actors along the value chain. So actually, all of these four benefits are really kind of the core objective of many EPR systems worldwide as well. A brief word on the organization I represent. We are a nonprofit founded in 2007, and we have roughly 2 decades of experience of develop environmental standard and driving finance to high-performing projects. We have a quite well-known verified carbon standard, which is a leading standard for the carbon market, and the plastic waste reduction standard underpins our plastic program, which was launched 5 years ago. And in those 5 years, we have seen more than 60 projects using our program, and 36 of them have successfully registered, received certifications through our program. You can see the geography of these programs really span across different geographies in Global North and Global South. The QR code leads to our registry where you can feel free to explore and look at the projects that are using our standard. Essentially, the program, as I mentioned, is underpinned by the plastic waste reduction standard, which provides overarching requirements for all projects, including but not limited to the scope and boundary and stakeholder engagement, environmental and social safeguard, and requirements for validation and verification. Supporting that, we have two methodologies. One is focused on plastic waste collection, and one is focused on plastic waste recycling. We have these two separate methodologies, which also means it's possible to receive two different types of credit, collection credits and recycling credits. We set it up this way because we see it as it's providing different value to the system, as collection is really about getting plastic waste out of nature and preventing pollution from preventing leakage from entering into the ecosystem, waterways, and oceans. And recycling is really more about circular economy, giving plastic second life, and reducing dependence on virgin plastics. These are the common activities that you can find under our program, for example, recovery ocean plastics, collections through waste pickers, municipal or private waste collection, infrastructure development, and mechanical and chemical recycling. So how does the program work? This is basically a project's life cycle. Where we're independent setter, we manage our standard, and we're not involved in project development. It's usually projects that will come use our standard, and they can demonstrate their compliance with our requirements through a third-party audit. And at Vera, we review the project documents and also audit report. If it's proved, then projects can receive certification, and Vera will issue them plastic credit. This credit then will be displayed on our registry, and then businesses can purchase these credits through for voluntary or mandatory purposes, and the investment will go back to the projects themselves. I just want to take you also slightly beyond the word credit and just look at the system behind it. And so what underpins a plastic credit is really a monitoring, reporting, and verification framework, and also the mandate for third-party audits and the transparent and public accessible registry. Why this is essential is really important for translating different sources of funding, whether it's multilateral or public funding or EPR fund or private funding, to real impact on the ground. EPR is, of course, a very interesting topic for us. It's also one of the source of funding that can be driven to create real impact. So we published a discussion paper last year to really to take a deep dive into the topic and see looking into various EPR systems globally and see what are the challenges and explore what potential benefits a program like ours could bring to these systems. Essentially, we see there are three key functions to effective EPR systems. Finance is, of course, quite most important. Drive finance to high quality collection and recycling projects on the ground. It should also increase infrastructure capacity and improve operations, including providing safeguard for environmental and social protection. The administration is also a key aspect. Transparent auditing, monitoring, and reporting on regulatory compliance and waste management outcomes. There are, of course, common challenges we've identified for each of these functions. For example, on administration, it's quite common for especially emerging markets to have limited regulatory and administrative capacity to oversee the implementation of EPR. There could be a lack of reliable data and the structure to measure and monitor compliance and impact. There's also a lack of standard measurement and reporting mechanisms and lack of transparency and verifiability on the impacts, as a lot of the programs now still only rely on self-reporting. And on finance, there is still a significant funding gap due to a lack of compliance, and in some cases, there is not a clear finance mandate under EPR system for to really effectively drive finance. And on the operations side, underdeveloped infrastructure is definitely a key challenge, and also not being inclusive enough for the informal sector is a common challenge for the emerging market. And through our report, feel free to take a deeper look at the report. We looked at EPR. We kind of categorized EPR systems into three different phases: initiation, transition, and maturity. And so there are some common characteristics for each of the phases, and the different systems, EPR system globally can be categorized under these phases. For example, phase one would be when the countries start to explore EPR and really to put EPR on the political agenda and to start having these discussions. It's quite common at this phase, they would have a voluntary industry-led initiative. And then the second phase, the key is really for the government to transition a voluntary system to a mandatory EPR system, and the government needs to establish a legally binding and enforceable regulatory framework to really enhance compliance and really track progress. And then for the third phase, for maturity, that's when EPR system already reached some level of efficiency, but of course there is continued improvement can be made, and also to include more innovation into the system. it's really key to kind of look deeper into this MRV framework that I mentioned and how it can help to have a more transparent, inclusive, and outcome-based EPR. These are the 4 pillars, and for example, stakeholder engagement and social environmental safeguards is quite key to really protect social benefits and natural resources. And the accounting framework that I mentioned should be globally and for example, our program is globally applicable and really have a way to account for impact. Independent third-party auditing is also mandated under our program and is also key to really uphold integrity. And we also have a public registry. Just you can take a look and see essentially that's where all the relevant project information is. This is the last slide I'll present. And so through these 4 pillars that I've just mentioned and the whole MRV system, we see there are some key benefits of using a program like ours to really support EPR systems. For example, for phase 1, for projects to really incorporate this MRV framework that we have and using a third-party audit, they can really help to demonstrate best practice and to really set a good example for from which the policy system can move from. And then for phase 2, in the transitional phase, plastic credit can be leveraged to ensure financial contributions are result-based, which is quite essential. And this is also a way to boost compliance and also improve transparency. And then for the third phase, innovation plays a key role. Our program has a rather broad scope, so it's possible for projects to leverage a program to target new materials, new technology, and areas that's essentially historically underserved. So hopefully that gives you a brief overview of our program and the benefits that could bring. And then I'll give back to you, Carlos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Video, for setting the stage and giving us this very comprehensive presentation and helping us to understand how plastic credit certification systems can strengthen EPR and serve as an innovative financing mechanism to support this transition towards circular economy and towards zero waste. So next we'll hear from Sarah Hadley, Operations Director at Plastic Collective, and Sarah will share practical insights from the field, including how the World Bank's outcome-based bond, leveraged by Vera's certification, and how outcome-based finance can support compliance under EPR systems. Sarah, please, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Carlos, and thank you for the invitation to present today. And hello, everyone. So I'm going to, as Carlos has alluded to, I'm going to talk about Plastic Collective's work in the outcomes-based finance space and the role that Vera certification is playing in this. And then I'll finish up with a few observations around extended producer responsibility implementation. But first, just a very quick introduction to Plastic Collective. So we're a social enterprise. We started in Australia about 10 years ago, and we work across the entire plastics ecosystem to deliver innovative finance and technical solutions that are aimed at addressing the global plastic pollution crisis. So by far and away, the biggest thing we've done so far in the outcomes-based finance world is to partner with the World Bank and Citi to issue the first ever plastic waste reduction linked bond. So this bond was issued in January 2024. It's a $100 million bond with a 7-year term, with the goal of adding up to 50,000 tonnes per annum of new collection and recycling capacity between the 2 projects that are funded by this bond. So this slide just gives you a little cheat sheet on how the bond works. The crucial thing the secret sauce, I should say, is that So the investors are investing $100 million. In return for that, they get an annual guaranteed coupon of 1.75%, which is below the market rate for a bond of this nature. So they're foregoing around $14 million in coupon payments over the term of the bond. And crucially, that money is flowing directly to two of our projects, one in Ghana and one in Indonesia. And that money is received upfront so that these two projects can expand their collection and recycling activity immediately. Well, obviously it takes some time, but they have the funds to do so and therefore have a real impact on the plastic pollution crisis that they're experiencing at the country level as well. In exchange for that, these projects need to maintain their VERA certification on an ongoing basis and issue credits, credit vintage every year. Those credits are sold, and then the revenue generated from those credit sales is used to make a credit-based coupon repayment to the investors, and that coupon repayment is a discretionary coupon payment. So that, in a nutshell, is how the bond works. I want to hone in on the role that the VERA standard is playing in the bond. And it's fair to say that it's playing an it's at the heart of ensuring the integrity of the projects for all the bond stakeholders. So as you would have seen on that previous slide, it's central, or it enables the creation of the credits, and therefore the payment of that discretionary credit-based coupon component. In addition, it's providing the infrastructure or the safeguards around social and environmental aspects. So one of the things that, for example, that bondholders were very careful to ensure was being properly managed at the project level was to ensure that there's zero child labour involved in the project. So that's just one of the safeguards that is covered by the plastic standard infrastructure. Similarly, the plastic standard specifies a quite detailed stakeholder engagement process that needs to be put in place. So each of our projects have undertaken stakeholder mapping. On the back of that, they've designed detailed stakeholder engagement plans, and they have to demonstrate that they're implementing those on an ongoing basis. And those plans have to have a particular focus on marginalised and vulnerable communities within that stakeholder cohort, with a view to ensuring that they are able to share in any project benefits. Fourthly, as Vigil has alluded to, or mentioned, there is a robust monitoring, reporting and independent verification framework built into the standard. So at the project level, once a year, the independent auditors will go in and do a site visit. They will produce a verification report. They'll also issue any site findings to address any non-conformities that they've identified. The project needs to go and address those once the auditor is satisfied that all the requirements of the standard are being met. That report is issued to VERA, which runs its own review and approval process so that the credits can ultimately be issued. That can take up to a year, so it's quite an intense process that we run year in, year out. Second last, additionality. So there are requirements in the standard to ensure that the activity of the project is over and above their business as usual activity. And that was something that was also important to the bondholders, because they want to be able to demonstrate the impact of the bond. They want to be able to show or demonstrate that the activity that they're funding is over and above what would have otherwise happened. And then finally, the appropriate end of life requirements of the standard are key, particularly from a recycling perspective. So the projects need to demonstrate that their final products, their pellets and flakes, are replacing virgin plastic, and that material is being incorporated by their customers or their off-takers in their recycled product manufacturing. So it's building circularity into the framework, or into the bond, I should say. Let's have a little look at the two projects that are funded under the bond. So our project in Accra in Ghana. So Ghana has a significant plastic pollution problem. It's got a 76% mismanagement rate. So the Asase project's a grassroots community-based project. It was started in 2019, and it's led by women, and it's targeting what's probably Ghana's biggest plastic pollution problem, and that is plastic sachets. And it's using the World Bank funding to build collection and recycling hubs in 3 new sites in the Accra region. And these are sites where there's essentially no waste management infrastructure at all. So we're about to start our 3rd verification under the plastic standard over the next couple of months. And one of the things I really love about this project is that they are remediating dump sites, which are all over Accra. And they've actually built one of their new collection and recycling hubs on top of an old dump site that they've remediated. They've also remediated a UNESCO World Heritage site as part of their work. So yeah, lots of impact that is emerging from the Asase project. Then our Green Core project, which is operated out of Surabaya in Indonesia, operating in one of the world's the top 5 plastic pollution hotspot. The project's focused on ocean-bound plastic, which it's collecting via its extensive network across Java. It's collecting a wide range of plastics, focusing on the more difficult to recycle plastics. So the World Bank funding that it has received via the bond is being used to install a new food-grade PET recycling line. And happy to report that that line is now up and running. And their second verification under the Vera standard is happening this month. And what I love about this project is Greencore has done has an arrangement with AXA, the insurance company, to provide basic health insurance to their community of waste pickers. And they've also partnered with a local NGO to renovate the schools in the communities where their waste pickers are living and working. So again, demonstrable impact via the Green Core project. I'll finish up with a few comments about extended producer responsibility and how our projects are placed to participate. So fortuitously, in both Indonesia and Ghana, there has been really quite good progress towards implementing EPR. So in Indonesia, there's presidential regulation that's anticipated around the middle of this year to come into force that will make EPR compliance mandatory. In Ghana, the EPA there is in final stages of drafting the EPR legislation, and that's expected to be implemented by the end of the year. So, as I said, we think the 2 projects, Asase and Greencore, are really quite well positioned to participate in these EPR activities. And that's because leading standards like the VERA standard specify really quite stringent monitoring, verification and reporting requirements. And these mirror the MRV requirements that are being embedded in EPR frameworks around the world. So in the same way that VERA and other leading standards are being used to generate high integrity credits in the voluntary credit market, these standards can also be used and relied upon to generate EPR certificates, which are the same thing as a credit, in mandatory EPR markets. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand back to Carlos. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much for these very, very valuable practical insights and on-the-ground results. Very, very, very interesting. So our next case study speaker is Ollie Cade, Chief Technology Officer and UK Country Manager at 7 Clean Seas. And Ollie will offer another field-based perspective, drawing on his work to bridge the funding gap for plastic waste management through scalable, high-integrity financing mechanisms. We do have some 1 or 2 questions already on the chat about that, Oli. So over to you. We look forward to learn more about the 7 Clean Seas. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Carlos. And it's a pleasure to meet you all and to be here sharing the mission and the impact that we've generated at 7 Clean Seas. I'll try and keep it as short as possible. So why does 7 Clean Seas exist? Well, there's obviously an issue in terms of the economics of plastic waste management. We know that the cost to collect, process, clean, sort all of the plastic itself is far larger than the value of the material. So we have a broken economic model where it costs more to run the infrastructure and maintain it than it does processing the material, which is contrary to other materials such as aluminium. So as a result, we use outcomes-based financing or innovative financing or plastic credits, however you'd like to call it, as a way of channeling sector and corporate funding into waste management infrastructure around the world. So I love showing this photo because this is from one of our project locations in Batam, which is our VERA certified project. It's just 45 minutes away from Singapore on the ferry. Obviously, Singapore renowned for being one of the cleanest countries in the world. So it shows this juxtaposition. And actually, a lot of the corporates that we work with come from the global north, come from places like the UK, Europe, Singapore, and they're using that funding to invest in communities like this in Batam. So we've been doing this for a number of years, actually approaching 8 years of scalable impact. We've worked with some incredible organizations over the way, from banks like Maybank and Luna, leading brands like The Economist, DHL, Howden Group Holdings, and several others. And I always say that really the impact that we do, we are just facilitators of it, but it's really the funding that we are provided by our corporate partners is actually driving and accelerating the initiatives. Can everyone still see my screen?
Just lost it.
Yeah, sorry. I just got a note.
Now it's back, Oli. Thank you.
No worries. Sorry, I got a note saying there was an error. But what I would say is really it's the plastic credit mechanism that is the facilitator or the enabler between funding from corporates down into plastic waste management projects. So a little bit about how we started. We were a beach cleanup organization in Singapore. We still do run a lot of those activities. But during COVID-19, we took a risk to build a project in Bintan. We hired 12 furloughed workers from the tourism industry to go out and collect plastic manually 5 days a week from the marine environment. And we went to the market and said, would anyone be interested in sponsoring that collection? So we ended up with 1 ton commitment to 2 to 3 to 4, and it kept growing. So we expanded our team from 12 to 20 up to 30. Then we launched another project in Batam where we grew that team from from 10 individuals all the way over to 60. We've got river barriers, household waste management, collection boats. In Thailand, we then expanded. We've got a larger vessel to service larger rivers, and so on and so forth. And we now, as of last year, also launched a project in Bali, Indonesia. So I think the key point is building or using kind of outcomes-based financing as a way of building scalable plastic waste management systems that are cleaning up, intercepting, and preventing plastic pollution at scale. That's our initiative. Of course, within the different standards, there's also the recycling piece as well, and using outcomes-based financing to look at that. So just a little bit more of an understanding on how it works, particularly within the certification cycles. So from our Batam project, year to date, we have recovered over 4,116 tons worth of plastic. So what we do, we build the projects, we design them, and we mobilize cleanup initiatives. We're hiring from the local community, providing formal employment and jobs. We then actually conduct that activities through those that I showed on the previous slide with household collection, manual collection from the environment. We have cleanup boats. We have all sorts of different solutions to meet the local context. All of that waste gets sent to our materials recovery facility, where anything that can be recycled gets diverted either into closed loop recycling or upcycling and downcycling. Anything that doesn't has to go to audited and certified end-of-life waste management systems. And then we get audited through the validation and verification bodies. Ours that we work with is called Control Union. Essentially, they come to us every time we want to issue credits that we can put on the market to generate revenue to finance the projects. And they spend multiple days auditing our projects, interviewing our teams, speaking with the local stakeholders, speaking with the government, making sure that the end-of-life treatment initiatives have environmental license, have the correct national and government capabilities, that they're fenced off, etc., etc. And then once we sell those credits onto the market, the revenue that we generate goes into not just funding the projects, but also scaling them. So that's how it looks like from a certification and auditing perspective, in particular with our Batam project. But it's not just that. It's through this initiative that we've been able to scale. So year on year, we've been growing our impact. We're currently collecting around about 220 tons worth of plastic a month. And year to date, we're over 7,130 tons. It keeps going up and up as of the day. But what I said is that we really were driven by this initiative because of the scale of the plastic pollution crisis that we had seen on our doorstep. But it was actually the social issue that has really grown and grown in importance for us. So today we are currently employing 126 waste collectors formally. That means social security payments, maternity, paternity, long-term contracts, sick pay, everything you would expect from basic formal employment that unfortunately a lot of these communities have never had access to. And beyond that, the lives improved for those communities through the employment provided, not just to them, but to their households, as well as infrastructure projects that we're building, such as re-roofing community houses, building washing stations in schools out of bricks that we use to upcycle the plastic or downcycle the plastic into. The human health benefits of the work that we do, reducing the spreading of dengue and malaria by reducing the plastic pollution, increasing sanitation in local communities, reducing the amount of plastic that's being openly burnt. We also believe that we're having an impact here. And then on the education programs that we run, not just at community levels with women's groups at local schools, within the local towns and town halls, but also on a corporate scale through corporate education as well. So we estimate that year to date, we have improved over 13,000 lives through the work that we do. And it's become one of the biggest centerpieces of our work. The reason why I bring this up is because we talk about social equity. Plastic waste management systems have been notoriously underfunded because it's a broken economic model. But if we can use this outcomes-based financing to increase the capital investment into waste management, that also has an added social and environmental perspective. As Carlos mentioned at the beginning, it's a real strong interconnectivity here. So when I say that credits and certifications are important, it's not just in terms of making sure and guaranteeing that when we say that we've collected a ton worth of plastic, that actually happens and it's processed correctly and it's got the correct legal licenses, but it's all that governance packaged within it that helps us actually enable the flow of finance from the global north into the global south. It's really the governance and transparency systems defined by these standards, which is building confidence to the buyers, that's enabling that investment. And it's not just that itself, but it's also the paper trail that it generates. It's through these base standards like VERA that we're able to then add additional social standards on top of it. So when I say that we meet ethical trade initiatives, base code for ethical employment, that there's an audit process that we go through to demonstrate that, but also all the way through to financial audits as well, making sure that we have these commodities that sit on the balance sheets that can be traced and audited by auditing bodies. And it's that governance that's really important, not just for the buyers, like the partners that we work with, but also within the context of EPR. So in April last year, we ran a roundtable with the UK government, the Department of Environment, Forestry and Rural Affairs. I swear this is my last slide. And we found a lot of really valuable interesting findings for how I suppose, phase 3, as Vigil described, EPR system could integrate plastic credits. And in the context of the UK, just a couple of points. We identified, and we already knew through what Sarah was presenting with the World Bank's landscape assessment and the bond, that in the UK system, their EPR notes or packaging recycling notes are equivalent to what we would define as a plastic credit within the VERA standards and other standards within our market. But to have that validated by DEFRA itself was really important. That there is an incentive, or there's an interest of credits that are being generated overseas in places like the global south to be integrated into a UK national system in the global north. They already have a mechanism for this, which are EPR notes called packaging export recycling notes that are already existing. Therefore, they wouldn't be against looking at how funding could be redirected from corporates in the UK into waste management projects in parts of the world that are suffering from plastic pollution. And this is partly driven by the UN's Global Plastic Treaty, which is going through rounds of negotiation, because countries are saying, well, how does the Global North finance some of this commitment to the treaty? And in the UK specifically, if 10% of the EPR obligations or EPR tax within the country could be redirected to places like the Philippines, like Indonesia, that would be around about £35 million per year. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that these systems in the UK already have a mechanism in previous iterations to include an evidence of equivalent action. The key learning that we got from DEFRA was the reason why this was removed from previous versions of EPR was the requirement for governments to actually audit and check the evidence of equivalent action. But having certifications like VERA and others within the industry actually allows for a second level or a third level of governance and compliance that the UK government itself can actually trust in to justify that evidence of equivalent action. And with that, I will hand back over to Carlos. Thank you so much for your time and for listening about 7 Clean Seas.
Thank you, Oli. Thank you very much for highlighting the importance of this innovation and credibility to generate measurable environmental and social impact. Thank you very much. So we will now move into the expert input segment, focusing on use of plastic credits as a complementary instrument to strengthen the design and implementation of EPR. We are some minutes behind the schedule, so we will ensure that we can manage our remaining minutes to accommodate some Q&A from the audience. Our experts for this segment will be Stephanie Baitian, Managing Director of PCX Solutions, and Stephanie will share some reflections on how these systems can be designed and applied in practice. And we also have Varun Agarwal, head of the plastic program at VERA, who works closely with governments and waste value chain actors to strengthen the role of the plastic program in supporting effective EPR systems. So we'll start with Stephanie. Stephanie, can you please explain how plastic credits work in the Philippines EPR scheme, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Carlos, for the introduction, and thanks for having me on that great webinar. I will also share my screen just for a few slides to explain the Philippine EPR. and then I switch off, and then we can just have a conversation and obviously deep dive into your questions as well. Can you see my screen actually?
Yes, we can see.
Yes. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so I'm leading PCX Solutions, which is a nonprofit organization that's born in the Philippines, really at the heart of the plastic pollution crisis. And we also have a standard for plastic credits, which is the Plastic Pollution Reduction Standard. And today we have issued over 180,000 credits, equivalent to 180,000 metric tons, by 45 projects, which are all around the world. But today I just focus on the Philippines, which is a very practical examples how plastic credits can be fully embedded into EPR schemes. And I know we are a little bit short, so I will try to keep it focused and short and sweet, but go to the essence really on the Philippine EPR, because it works quite different from a classical European EPR scheme. And it should be simply an inspiration for other developing countries to implement an ambitious EPR scheme in quite short time, with the help of plastic credit, but not solely relying on them. And it actually also started by companies taking action on a voluntary basis. And then we were able to provide concrete data and information to the government when the EPR was designed. So it came into force in 2023. It's now the 4th year of compliance. It's interesting that there are strict penalties included in the legislation, which is missing in some other countries. Materials are covered, divided by mostly flexible enrichers. I think the interesting portion is that there are really 6 upstream measures included that help companies reduce their footprint. And then there are 6 downstream measures which help companies to recover their footprint. So I think there is a built-in mechanism really to help reduction in the first place. And when I say that companies have to take responsibility, again, it works a little bit differently, because first of all, companies, they have to measure their footprint, which is important in any EPR scheme. They have to get it third-party audited, and then they have to take a growing percentage of compliance targets year on year. So it's a quite ambitious target. It goes up to 80% in 2028, which means that the compliance is measured in weight. So if they bring in 100 tons of plastic into the market, they have to take, this year, 2026, they have to take 60% responsibility, which means they have to prove the recovery of 60 tons of plastic. So I think that's a bit of a different logic. They can do it individually or through an PRO. And as I mentioned, they have upstream measures that help reduce their footprint. And with a growing percentage, the cost for the recovery for the plastic credit also starts to hurt, which means that there is an incentive to reduce. And then, of course, there's also a reporting mechanism and an audit built into that system. Now, how plastic credits really play a role here, I can show in this next slide. Yeah, so in our standard, similar to Vera with some differences, it's basically 1 metric ton of plastic waste that in our case has to be collected, transported, and brought to end of waste, will then generate 1 plastic credit that counts towards the EPR compliance, but can also be bought on a voluntary basis on top. So what we have seen in the Philippines, which is really interesting, not all companies have complied yet. That's ongoing work, awareness building, and so on. But the companies that complied, they actually over-complied. So when the goal was 50%, many of them did already 100%, or collectively it was 60%. So it's very easy for companies to comply, but also to over-comply, which is a great sign. The other important element, which we also have heard from Vigil before, is that there is third-party audits included. So in our case, there is an initial project audit by a third-party VVB at the start of the project. And then in our standard, we do a continuous impact verification on really a transaction basis, line by line, metric ton by metric ton, so that there are 2 checks and balances built into the system, and it's all published in a registry. There is someone, okay. Someone unmuted. A quick slide just on generally the unit economic of plastic and how plastic credits really help change that. Because a lot of people say that recycled content or recycled plastic is too expensive, but the reality is that virgin plastic is simply too cheap because the externalities are not priced in. So if you make companies take responsibility for their footprint, for example, through the EPR, then the companies really have to add this cost for recovery on the virgin plastic price, and thereby you reduce the price gap to recycled content and help make way for innovations on alternative materials, infrastructure funding, and so on. And the cost of the plastic credit in itself should be shared throughout the value chain to the different players in the value chain. So just in the interest of time, wrapping up how credits can really help an EPR scheme, it can be simply one way of compliance, preparing for EPR schemes, but also being one element of complying within EPR schemes. The plastic credits have the opportunity to fund like OPEX and CAPEX. They have already verification system built in that really help prove then the impact, both to the companies that buy those credits, but also to the government to make sure that really the EPR funds arrive directly to the waste management. And of course, as we discussed already, they can help provide shared value throughout the value chain. And lastly, there are already public registries, so also using credits in EPR scheme that should be embedded. We published a case study that was quite early when the Philippine EPR laws was enacted, so it's not totally updated, but at least it explains quite well how the system works. So you can scan the QR code, or we provide it then to the audience so you can take a look. And with that, yeah, I would just stop share and we can have a discussion for the last few minutes.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you very much for this presentation and the insights. And now I will turn over to Varun. And Varun, my first question to you will be like, from what we heard, can you explain what are the key commonalities between credit systems and EPR systems, please? Over to you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for that question, Carlos, and happy to be here. So I think a lot has been said. My colleague Vijay, Stephanie also covered a lot of those aspects, but I think I'll just start with a little bit of the problem that both these mechanisms are trying to solve. So I think at a fundamental level, both the crediting systems and EPR are trying to solve the same problem, which is the cost of managing plastic waste, which is not fully captured in the price of products. So as Stephanie also said, I think these externalities are not captured in how the products are priced. And both these systems are designed to correct that by creating this financial responsibility for the end of life of plastic. So I think I'd say the first commonality would be that these are both, of course, undebatably of the financing mechanisms, and both systems are about mobilizing funds at scale. In EPR, I think there could be different mechanisms where producers contribute a fee into a system, or targets are given to these producers for which they need to set up their own collection, recycling, or whatever. So there are different ways in which EPR works. But in crediting systems, companies can directly finance the same activities through the purchase of credits. So different structures, I'd say, but I think they're all meant to get towards the same objective. So they are meant to create a predictable flow of finance into waste management. I think the second commonality, according to us, that I see is would be the core focus on producing measurable, I'd say, high integrity outcomes. And that is where the alignment between credits and EPR schemes becomes very, very concrete. So in our programs, as you've already heard, Stephanie also mentioned, there is a diversion credit. We have two types of credits where we differentiate between collection and recycling, where collection funds the recovery of plastic waste, while recycling credits represent the actual processing of that waste into recycled materials. So basically closing the loop on the system. And this distinction, I think I feel is important to highlight because it closely mirrors how some of the EPR targets are also structured. Of course, EPR is very, I'd say it's not uniform. I would like to see a world where ideally, we have very similar kind of EPR schemes functioning everywhere, but I think depending on jurisdictions, we have very customized sort of mechanisms which are working. So many separate EPR systems also set targets for collection, recycling, and some also go as far as setting targets for recycled content back into packaging. So I think so in practice, crediting systems are very much aligned with how policymakers define and measure performance. And this in turn also helps the businesses and governments to target specific gaps, whether that is improving collection or whether that is ensuring that the collected waste, whatever is recyclable, is recycled. So I think there's another stark reality that not all the packaging or all the plastic waste is recyclable. So we definitely need different avenues through which the collected waste can be handled, whether that goes to energy recovery or other, I'd say, end of life scenarios. So I'd also like to touch upon a few other aspects. I'll try to be brief. I know we are a little behind on time. So I think the commonalities can continue, and there are a lot of them, but I'd like to also highlight some of the gaps where ambition and implementation in many EPR systems are there. So I think another aspect to highlight is the monitoring, reporting, and verification, where how both the crediting or certification systems and even the EPR depend on the ability to demonstrate measurable and credible real-world impact. But I would say that building robust MRV systems at a national level, at a country level, is very complex. And many of the EPR schemes that we see are evolving in this area. So that is where I'd say that the certification systems like ours, the Vera Plastic Program, PCX, and others, which already provide established MRV frameworks where every ton is tracked, documented, and independently verified through independent audits. And I think you also touched upon an important aspect of traceability, where both the systems require this ability to follow material flow across the value chains from collection to final processing. And again, I'd say traceability remains a huge challenge in many of the EPR systems, especially in the emerging markets and developing economies, where the markets are quite fragmented, especially where waste workers and informal sector is involved. And that's again where certification systems can provide a very structured and comprehensive approach with clear methodologies, documentation requirements, and registries that track these system flows and claims. And my last point here would be very important that we see from our perspective, and that's required very much in the waste management systems, is safeguards, especially focusing on a just transition of the informal sector. So there's increasing recognition that waste management systems must be socially responsible and inclusive. I think all the EPR systems want that, but I think implementation is quite uneven if we look at it from that lens. So that's where, again, I think certification systems or crediting programs have a huge role to play, because we do have all these robust social and environmental safeguard requirements directly built into our standards with specific requirements on working conditions of these people, compensation, compliance with, for example, even little things like providing the protective gear and equipment that they need. And all of this, these are not just requirements, they're all independently audited, verified by third-party auditors to ensure that actually these things are happening on the ground. So I'd say, I think in summary, EPR and crediting systems mobilize finance, aligning on measurable outcomes, and they both should ideally depend on strong assurance. But I think where they differ is how much of this operational architecture is already in place. So I think many EPR systems are still building it, whereas the certification systems or the crediting systems have already built it, and we are already operating with that architecture at scale. And I think that is where lies the real opportunity, where certification or crediting can act as a real enabler of EPR. I think accelerating rollout, stress testing some of these schemes in the pilot, I think in pilot forms, or even in some of the I think operational EPRs, so that it can help strengthen credibility without governments needing to build everything from scratch. So I think I'll pause there, and sorry for the long-winded response.
No, thank you. Thank you, Varun. Thank you very much for these valuable insights. And unfortunately, we reached out our time limit. But it was really, really excellent from our to listen from our speakers and experts that we can really build these innovative solutions and integrate financing mechanisms to support the transition towards a more sustainable and just future, aiming at this zero waste approach, because we can no longer afford to continue living on a wasteful society. So I will now hand over to Cecilia Anderson, lead of the Solid Waste Management Unit of UN Habitat, for the closing of the webinar and to share her key takeaways, but to ensure our participants that we will share your questions to our speakers so they can address the doubts and comments. And I look very much forward to hosting you all in soon, very soon, for the new episodes of our webinar series. Cecilia, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Carlos, and thank you, everybody. And really, my role is just on behalf of UN Habitat to just say really thank you to Carlos as the moderator and to our speakers, Vigil, Varun, Sarah, Oliver, Stephanie. I think really rich presentations and such practical examples as well on how plastic credits can really complement the EPR systems. Some of the key takeaways that I managed to capture is really that plastic credits can help to mobilize early finance, making operations stronger and maybe more secure, and also strengthening monitoring, but only when they're designed to be complementary. I think Varun actually brought that up very clearly as well. They need to be complementary to the EPR systems, ensuring that they preserve the environment, but also deliver the social benefits to waste workers and to communities, which we all want to see benefit from this. We would, of course, like to see cities and local governments really at the forefront of making this reality. Municipal authorities and urban service providers are really responsible for delivering essential on-the-ground functions, such as waste collection, segregation, traceability, and community engagement. So they're really pivotal in embedding this credit-backed activities within the urban systems that they develop and integrating them into city plans, for example, procurement processes, local financing mechanisms, and ensuring alignment with broader urban development priorities and long-term sustainability. I feel that we're sort of starting this dialogue, and what we would also like to see this dialogue now moving into action. And we, as UN Habitat, stand ready to support as many of the partners that are here. And we really would like to see how we can do that through capacity, through peer exchanges, and of course, with our Wastewise Cities platform, we hope that we can provide those opportunities. But finally, I'd really like to encourage everybody to sort of pilot carefully designed initiatives that place a strong emphasis on, and I think Varun brought this up as well, monitoring, reporting, and verification, and adopting sort of those robust social safeguards. We really want to ensure that informal workers and waste recyclers are meaningfully included and protected and fairly compensated. And we are all really excited to be able to continue this discussion. But thank you everybody for joining, and we really look forward to translating these ideas into inclusive and scalable action. Thank you very much, and back to you, Carlos.
Thank you, Cecilia. So a very, very interesting summary you provided to us with some, I would say, key points and homework. Let's continue the good work. Let's continue playing this important role. Congratulations to our speakers, our experts, and count on us, the UNSG Advisory Board, UN Habitat, and all organizations towards this just, equitable, and sustainable zero waste future. Thank you. See you all next time. Take care. Looking forward to it. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.